Um, so what we really have here is everybody who is working really closely with us to bring in those big priorities into curriculum. And so happy to have everybody here today who is part of this process. And again, just very, very grateful for the work that's being done in our district and really want to help to build upon that. And so very, very big welcome to our extended NCIS teams. So today we're looking at curriculum implementation through the lens of inclusion and differentiation. And so when we look at that, we're really looking at trying to create connections between the great work that's happening in the areas of inclusion and differentiation in Calgary Catholic and the new curriculum outcomes so that we can build upon that to provide some practical implementation strategies. And then I think what's really important here is that we don't know what's happening with curriculum. At the end of May, hopefully we will find out what the plan is from a provincial perspective. But what we do know is that these big rocks of learning that we are focusing on through curriculum are not going to change. Good practice is good practice. And so we're really trying to look at curriculum implementation in this very volatile context as a way of continuing to build on the great work. So that's the purpose of this next sort of set cycle as we're moving forward. So today we're going to be looking at, I'm just going to provide you some updates, and then our extended NCIS team is going to be providing some of their big rocks and ideas for inclusion and differentiation. And then our subject area consultants are going to be providing some updates and some next steps. So a big thank you. I know we've just come out of, hard to believe, Christmas holidays, and now the great work that has happened with writing progress reports. And we know it is a huge job. And just want to say a big, big thank you to teachers for all of the amazing work that has happened to get to this point. So learning new outcomes, assessing, trying to make those connections to the knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures, combining physical education and wellness, into one achievement level and comment, using the new comments and the stems with the new curriculum outcomes that are aligned to it, and of course, the benchmarks, the LSPs, and all of the literacy and numeracy screeners and those types of things that are happening to really provide inclusion and differentiation data so we can start to see now what. So we're hoping today we'll be able to give you some of that now what. So a reminder about resources. Remember, they're a buffet, and I use this term a lot. Our resources, we had one-time funding, and it's a blessing and a curse in that we only had 1 year to spend the money that was provided for us from the government. And so we are providing resources that we hope will be in your schools for a number of years to come, but you need to take your time. You're not going to be able to learn all of these resources at once. So just play, just have a few sampling of it and see which ones are sticking for you in your class, meeting your needs and your student needs. And please don't be afraid to ask for help. We will continue to guide and support and just walk alongside you in this process. And another reminder is that any resource that we have been provided is not the curriculum. There is no one resource that is going to meet all of the curriculum outcomes in that particular subject area. So please be mindful as professionals, you're designers of that learning. Our teachers are designers of the learning and experience. And so they are kind of pulling from this buffet to see what is going to work best to serve the students that are in their classes. And as you move into parent-teacher conferences, some thoughts I had for you as you sort of move into parent-teacher conferences, things you might want to be aware of, is that we want to remind them that this architecture is new. The architecture of the new curriculum is new, but a lot of it is the same. And so really our focus has been on learning the new outcomes, understanding the changes and the differences in those big rocks of changes, or the things that we're focusing on that we know is good practice and good pedagogy. And I'm going to go a bit deeper into that in just a second. But we also, many of you have already shared these out with your school communities. But if you haven't, our Curriculum at a Glance documents that were created to support you in each of the grade levels are there. They're 2 pages, but on the back side of it, you'll see the detail around the new curriculum. And so again, trying to pull out those big rocks within each of them. So parents may want to have a little bit more information about what is this curriculum, and so that is available for you. The other piece is the online math program for Zorbits. That is one of the math programs that we have provided for schools for this year, and we're really hopeful we'll be able to pay for a second year through this year's budget. But this is the one that allows for that homeschool connection to happen. And also, Bev will talk a little bit later about the data dashboards and how that can continue to help you differentiate and identify where particular school needs are, both in the classroom and in the school as a whole. And so we'll share a bit more information, but get those memberships set up, get the login sent home to parents. And even if you're not implementing it right now, please, that's a really, really curricularly aligned resource that can provide that home connection. So they're working on something that's fun, but also very educational, of which you can then look and see where students are at and make those adaptations for them. So with the new curriculum, we know that it's kind of a spiral. We're always sort of spiraling up and down. And we've spent a lot of time focusing on learning outcomes and on the knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures, because that was what we needed to understand first, because that's most similar to what we're used to. So as we move forward, I really want to encourage you to remember the other pieces to the curriculum. That is looking at the organizing ideas, and that's where your concepts are going to live. The big ideas, the big goals, the big categories of this curriculum are going to be connected into your organizing ideas. So you'll know that on the reflection tools, those we highlighted in red, those are the organizing ideas that have helped to support you. The next sort of piece of the new curriculum architecture is those guiding questions. So again, if you tend to focus in more on an inquiry-based approach, or you want to do a project with your students, then starting with that guiding question to start gathering student input and student ideas around this concept, then you'll be able to use the guiding questions as the stepping off point. So remember, that's there. You don't have to create it. Back in the day, we used to have to figure that out ourselves. This is really giving you a great start to what a good sort of guiding question and an inquiry might be to engage students in that higher order thinking. Of course, we know our learning outcomes, and we've said time and time again, it is not the cusps that need to be assessed and reported on. It is the learning outcomes that need to be assessed and reported on. So our knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures, they support, our learning outcomes. They help us to reflect as a teacher, what is it I need to be focusing on? Kind of from what I've taught the kids, what are they kind of showing some areas of strength in? But the really important thing to remember is they're not a checklist. It is important. It's kind of a bit of a way of looking at cusps as indicators, but ways to kind of guide planning and instruction. They need to be taught, but they're not all weighted equally, nor do they all need to be assessed and reported on. So be mindful of that as you're moving forward into your next set of cycle of learning. So this is my caution. We developed these reflection tools because we wanted to take that big curriculum and we wanted to provide it in a way that was going to be less overwhelming. So we made some decisions around, we want those concepts to be super clear. So we highlighted those outcomes and the concepts within the outcomes in red. And then those skills and procedures, it doesn't include the knowledge or the understandings, but the skills and procedures, it's very clear that there's a lot of them and they're not all equal. So you need to that's kind of for you to kind of play around with, or for teachers to play around with, say, which ones do I want to start first with? Which ones am I going to do a bit later once kids have some basic skills? And then we're going to scaffold it up into those most higher level thinking. So there is an opportunity to scaffold even when you look at those skills and procedures. It's super important that they're a reflection tool. And you may share them. I know many of you have printed them off for your students. They're wonderful to share with parents, but please make sure parents understand that this is not a checklist. This is a guide, so you can make those professional decisions based on observations, conversations, and products where their child is at. So we hope that that clears it up. Your focus should really be lying on those outcomes and concepts, and you're really the playing spaces in those skills and procedures, as well as the knowledge and understandings, but they're not in isolation of those organizing ideas and guiding questions. So when we look at reporting, there is no way you're going to report on everything that you have taught or assessed. So please remember, we got this straight from Alberta Education. Progress reports is one way to report student achievement or progress toward an outcome. You've got Seesaw, parent-teacher interviews, phone calls, Google Classroom, sending projects home, many, many different ways in which you send student evidence of learning home or communicate that with parents. So please remember, we're reporting, even though we place report cards, progress reports on this really big pedestal, it is important. It is one small sliver of the work that we share. So please try to balance that with your parents whenever you're having these conversations. This becomes particularly important in the area of Pew. When we look at the PE outcomes, we know 66% of those outcomes, that's kind of the weighting of that PE literacy, the physical literacy and movement piece of the progress report. And then wellness play is about 33% of the weighting of the Pew achievement level. But it's super important parents understand it's really not about that grade. It's a combination of many, many things. And these are the different evidence and ways that we know where student successes are. We also want to just give you, I've put in here for the point of the slides, but this is the information straight from Alberta Education, that Alberta Regional PD Consortium, who helps to lead the rollout of this, that around the cusp versus the outcomes and what do we teach and what do we assess and report on. So I included that in here because I really want you to see the blue part. Teachers must use their professional judgment and best practices to determine if a student has met the minimum requirements outlined in curriculum. That is key. Professional judgment and best practices. So that autonomy within this curriculum is really evident and supported. So please know that and reach out to the team if you have any questions around the direction on assessment and reporting. I want to remind you that you've got this, right? You've got this as we're moving forward. We talked last set meeting on that relationships really matter most. We've instruction and assessment, but it's about relationship. And knowing that it is like the double helix, it's like a very organic place that we are as educators when we support students. I also know that as you're moving into this, Cheryl from CRC at last set again, talked to us about the difference between being a coach, which you're doing every day to foster those relationships, but now you're in the judge stage. But when you move into interviews, I encourage you to remind them that there's many, many different ways that you are judging or assessing student learning. And then finally, remember, bring cake. Everybody loves cake. So this will mean something if you were at the last set meeting. If not, I'm sorry. You're probably all hungry. It's the end of the day. But I do want to remind you that, bring clarity to it. You've got this, right? So we're meeting students where they're at. Many of the outcomes remain the same. And it's outcomes-based assessment is clear and it's helpful. We care about our students. We're always using good pedagogy regardless of curriculum, and we are responsive in our assessment for learning. And then finally, have confidence. You know what you know, and you have confidence in the work that you're doing. And so please know that all three things, as you walk into and move into parent-teacher conferences, is going to play a piece of that. So I hope that you're bringing in that clarity, the care, and the confidence. And if you are worried at all or you have questions, please reach out to the team. We're happy to help. So I just now some updates. So when we look at set cycle 3, so as we move into your one in-person meeting, and your only in-person meeting, because that's it for our sets. I'm going to talk about that in a second. I want to remind you that our new curriculum implementation, EPD and Google site has two areas. One is what's new and one is coming soon. We want to save teachers time of going and having to go through everything to see what am I missing or what do I need to know. So just click on that what's new tab and you can see, oh, have I seen these updates? Great. And you can also see what's coming soon. So we're going to continually update that so you'll know whether or not to dig deeper and or to spend more time in that site. We want to also make sure that as we're moving forward in this set cycle, we're connecting to those outcomes. We're planning for differentiation and scaffolding learning. We're identifying some universal support. So we're doing things with the whole class as opposed to trying to be everywhere for everybody and using centers and those sort of universal strategies to support that learning. And then, of course, like I said earlier, just building on district priorities. I've put the link in here for our resources and also our resources that are coming soon, some highlights. Scholastic Decodables, you've got those print copies. We've got now a digital license for all the schools for this year and probably for next year. We've got some math dollars and coin sets. So the money kits are coming, the manipulatives, the math jumpstart lessons, and of course the print copy of the mathology books. Now, again, we're looking at sustainability. So when we're looking at resources right now, we want tangible things that are going to last for years to come. We can't do it with every resource, but we're trying to do it with many of the core resources. PD opportunities, you can find them at on this bit.ly. We're starting to build those out right now. Some great things happening. And then also just keep looking at our Google site for those updates. As we move, we're continuously improving. We're learning and adapting as we go. And so we are moving on the road. We're going on the road, the NCIS team. We've spent 3 days, the last 3 days at schools, at our Spanish bilingual schools, working with their amazing teachers and administrators to just dig into curriculum. Let's see how can we support? Very informal, it's just digging in, walking alongside. We're learning a ton. And I hope that we're able to be able to share some of the things. And it's a very much working. We get stuff done when we're there. And again, we just want to remind you that if you would like the team to come on out or members of our team to come on out to be there for half a day or an hour here and there and an after school session, please do reach out, email us if you're interested. And again, we're a small team, so we'll do our best, but we can support you in person or virtually. We can pop on at a staff meeting and provide a bit of information there. So we are here to help you. So please just reach out and let us know how we can do that. Some changes to our set learning cycles. We've got we've done some great work. I've extended the learning cycle number 3 to include April and into May a little bit, where we focus here on differentiation and inclusion. So very similar to what we've done previously. We have this virtual set, and then we'll have one more in-person set. We've really expanded out our guest teachers allocations to be able to continue to once again offer it to schools, so you can do that meaningful implementation within your schools, give teachers some time again to dig in. And we've also expanded out our PG for this particular cycle. We felt this was the opportune time as opposed to saving it to the end of the year. So that means that as we move forward into our last set cycle, there's not going to be an in-person session. There'll just be a virtual session. Again, we want to get out to schools more. And then we also want to be able to provide sort of some direction when we have more information about what's happening. So some considerations as you're moving into, you come to our your in-person session, is we'll be doing more conversations. So we'll be doing some breakout groups where we'll be having to be able to show and share and talk more through things. Bring your computers, please. It's going to be more working sessions, more participation. So please make sure that you come prepared for that, as well as even if you're coming in the morning, we're likely going to be spending some time outside. So please dress for the weather. We're going to talk a little bit about that when we get more into the Indigenous Big Rocks and land-based learning. So we continue to weave the what of curriculum into pedagogy, the how, and then the why being our inclusive practices. So as we move into our next section, I'm so happy that our NCIS extension team are here. And I'm just going to, we've seen this back in May and June last year, but I do want to play it again because this concept of big rocks is I think the reality is we only have so much time in the day. We also don't know if the curriculum is going to be changing. So it's like, why would we put the effort into something where we don't know what's going on? Well, number one, we have to, it's mandated. But number two is because we're actually focusing more on those big rocks, what we know is good pedagogy. And we're using curriculum just as a vehicle in which to do that. So I don't want to minimize the work teachers are doing in learning the new curriculum and the outcomes, but I do want to validate the fact that a lot of the work that you're already doing, this is certainly what we've seen in schools, is amazing. Keep doing good teaching and learning. Keep developing practice around inclusive practices, student engagement, because those are the big rocks that are going to drive student learning into positive spaces. So I'm going to just very quickly share this video, and then we're going to be moving on to our NCIS inclusion team presentations of their big rocks. Or maybe we're not. We just see what just happened. I don't know why it didn't work. It's going to go like this and see if it works this way. So as we look at this concept of, the big rocks is our pedagogy. Those things as a district that we have placed as priorities, those are our big rocks. And so when we look at, the smaller rocks, so the boulders, the rocks and the pebbles, and then the sand, when we look at the sort of the smaller rocks, that kind of becomes a curriculum. And you kind of see the layering happening, where we're kind of trying to bring it in a way that no matter what happens, those big rocks are going to continue to stay with us. And so I'm so excited. Let me just put my screen on again. And now the video will start playing, but no, okay. I just want to say a big thank you to our NCIS inclusion teams. They've come and presented a couple of times with our community of practice teachers. And again, they're just the wealth of knowledge, and their teams. I know they represent their teams when they come and share with you today. But just a very, very huge thank you to them for continuing to remind us and almost give us permission to walk alongside and to go into spaces where we want to be informed. We want to be informed, culturally responsive teachings. We want to be trauma informed. We want to be, understanding more about how we can serve the community that our students, the communities that we're in. And so I just so appreciate their insights. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Matt Sawyer. Hi, Matt.
Hello. How are you then?
Hi, good. How are you doing?
I am fantastic, thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you everybody for the opportunity to connect with you for a few minutes here during this session. My name is Matt Sawyer. I am one of the consultants with the racial justice team with a focus on teaching and learning. So I've had the opportunity, I saw some of the names to meet and work with some of the teachers in here, but to be honest, most of the names are new to me, which you may be familiar with some of our work, depending on what school you're at and what you've done in your schools up until this point. The focus of the next few minutes that I'm going to chat about is on culturally responsive teaching. As you see there, it's a really big rock, and it is certainly a focus for our team and for our district this year, and just embedding in some more culturally responsive teaching practices within to what we are already doing. And I appreciate what Lynn had said earlier, that that, bringing an equity lens and culturally responsive teaching framework to our work is certainly not an add-on, but it's an infusion and embedding within. I apologize, I forgot to put this on the slide, but if you are able to look in the chat, I know some people may be on their phone or whatnot, it might be a little challenging to navigate, but in the chat, I just threw up a quote there, and it says, cultural responsiveness is not a practice. It's what informs our practice, so we can make better teaching choices for listening, engaging, motivating, supporting, and expanding the intellectual capacity of all our students. And that's really what it's about. So bringing a culturally responsive lens to our teaching practices benefits not just our racialized students, but it truthfully benefits all of our students in our classes, regardless of their story. And that's what it really does, is it puts their story and who they are at the forefront. The model that we've adopted, which may be familiar to some of you, is called, from Zaretta Hammond, and it is called Culturally Responsiveness and the Brain. And if we could go to the next slide, she has a framework there, and you could see it there, and it's called the Ready for Rigor framework. And there are 4 quadrants to the framework. Now, the first PG session that we ran, that schools and teachers had the option to view earlier in the year, we had a 45-minute video on awareness, where we spoke about bringing an awareness to our practices, and really talked actually about biases. Truthfully, was the focus of that, and recognizing the biases that we all do have when we walk in this world and when we enter our classrooms and work with our students. That 45-minute PG session is available actually on our EPD. If you didn't have an opportunity to take a look at it, and it has some activities and some things to think about associated with it. And so that's the first quadrant. The second quadrant, which would be the next slide, is learning partnerships. And this is the one. So the January 30th PG session, it has a racial justice focus, so the one that's coming up. So this is a spoiler alert for those of you who may not know. And the video that we have created is focused on building learning partnerships. So it's an hour-and-a-half PG that all schools in our district will be going through. And it's about developing those learning partnerships with our students, and also building learning partnerships with coworkers. And so for that PG session, in addition, obviously there's a video that we've recorded, but there are a lot of resources and some activities and some discussion points and some journal activity and reflection opportunities for our staff to go through that we hope you find really enriching and helpful for you in starting to think about developing the learning partnerships. The third quadrant, if we could move on, is on information processing. And this there are the three other quadrants really talk about that awareness, ourselves as educators and the lens in which we look at the world. The second one is developing those learning partnerships, creating connections and partnerships with others. The fourth, which we'll get to in a second, is the learning environment. But this third one really is the one that ties more into the curricular pieces that we're working on. It really talks about the brain and how the brain works, and understanding how culture impacts the brain's information processing, and using brain-based information processing strategies common to oral culture. So it really talks about the assignments. It taps into the lessons, into the pedagogy, and the new curriculum. Really, that's not to ignore the other 3 quadrants. They're incredibly important. And in fact, Zaretta Hammond says that you'll see there's those 4 quadrants, but there's a circle in the middle. It's just very telling that they're all really interconnected, and we are constantly working on all 4 quadrants. The fourth quadrant, which is the next one, is this community building and building the learning environment. So it talks about the learning environment as a physical space, as a space that when enters, that students, parents see themselves within, for sure. It also speaks about the learning environment which we build in our classes, such that students feel like they're part of that environment and they can see themselves in that environment. And it also speaks to elements of restorative practices and restorative justice, which we've been working on within our district as well. When you look at that framework, this is the framework, the Ready for Rigor framework. It's obviously it's small right here, but beneath every one of those headings, there are several bullet points, 6, 7, 8 bullet points. We really invite teachers to take a look at a quadrant. Just pick one quadrant, and you know what? Like I said, the January 30th PG is on learning partnerships, and so maybe that's where we focus now. But we look at that quadrant and just kind of select one bullet point and make that a focus, a goal of something to work on as it pertains to the new curriculum. We've invited and introduced learning sprints, and learning sprints are just a way of working towards this goal, and just to give you an opportunity to work towards it and to reflect on how that's going. Now, all of this information, way more, there are several like 20, 30 slide PowerPoint presentations for each one of those quadrants, with activities and things to think on, reflections, are all available on our Rachel Jetta EPD. There's a lot of information there. So if you haven't had an opportunity, when you do have an opportunity, I encourage you just to take a look at the EPD and at those resources. Also in the EPD, you'll find it's called Books and Media. We've uploaded several textbooks for all divisions, Division 1, 2, 3, and 4. Obviously, our focus right now is the Division 1, but text there from diverse voices. And I need to update it. I have a massive list to add to it, which I'm hoping to do before Black History Month, just to add more text on there. There's a little picture and a little bio of what goes on in the book. A little synopsis of the book. If you know of other texts, French, English, Spanish, please send them my way, because we do have English and Spanish resources on there as well. And French resources on there as well. I will upload them on and on. So so please take a look at the EPD when you have an opportunity, and feel free to anytime just to connect with me. I'd love to have the conversations. So thank you for that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Matt. And again, we really, really appreciate every time I learn something new. So thank you for that. We're going to move on now to to Danielle. So Danielle is a member, a consultant with our behavior team. And so we've been working closely with her. And again, there are many, many people that work in her team, but we're very, very grateful to have her walking alongside us and helping us out. So it's on to you, Danielle.
Thanks so much, Lynn. So hi, everybody. We really appreciate the opportunity to collaborate all together with the NCIS team and the incredible work that they have been doing to ultimately support students as we transition with our curriculum. So the three big rocks that the behavior team identifies would be the student story, the therapeutic framework, which has now been changed to the wellness framework, and looking at trauma-informed practice. So when we go on to the next slide, you'll have an idea of the visual that we have been using, and it's kind of changing at this point in time. And I know that Leanne Timko is currently kind of rolling out a new visual, as well as changing the therapeutic framework to wellness framework, which fits really nicely and I think really encompasses all of the different ideas that we, as for our diverse learners, as well as our Jedi team, our Indigenous team, everyone kind of can fit into. So listening to Matt, when he speaks about the community building, that really kind of is the same idea as our wellness framework. We just call it something different. And so as we move forward as a district, I think it's really important that we recognize that these are not silos. These are not ideas and concepts that are just for behavior students, or just for our mental health students, or just for our students of color. These are all encompassing, and that, it is a universal sort of approach that we take with our students. So on the outside, that student story is so incredibly important, because we have to have an understanding of how our students come to us, what has happened to them, and what is it that is occurring with them, to be able to address and to approach a level of safety, so that our students ultimately can start to take some risks in the skill building and the success. We do whole presentations, and so I'm trying to really condense it into the 5 minutes that we've been given. But I think that it's really important that we recognize that safety, similar to that community building, focuses on how do students present within our classrooms, at school, and that really can look very different. And so taking all of that into consideration and really approaching students in a way that supports them so that when we move up that framework to the skills section, that is when we start to really tie in the new curriculum. That is when we are able to recognize at this point that they are ready, they are available to learning, and we can help identify what those triggers are so that we can continue to build upon all of those different aspects. And ultimately, we're looking at success. So students reaching success at this point might look different. So, you know, as we talk about the new curriculum, we have to be really understanding that it's not going to fit for everybody. So we have to be really aware of each of those levels and each of those triggers, and just understanding how it is that we can continue to serve to have students reach success. I've put in here a quote: "The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth." This particular quote is something that I feel, especially with our behavior students, is really evident. When students don't feel safe, when students do not feel connection, have relationship, they will present and they will be loud and they will show up in the most inopportune times. And it is how we respond through our wellness framework to be able to collect and to be able to address how we are able to weave in those new curriculum outcomes to be able to support our students. And so looking at some of the resources to be able to tie some of this together and really connect to where we're at implementing some of those social emotional learnings, it's really important that we start to recognize some of these different things. So we've got zones of regulation, different literacy resources that are on here. Help for Billy is a big one, Superflex. There's tons and tons of resources out there. And one that is not on this page is the PATHS program, which there's various schools that are running the PATHS program. It stands for Promoting Alternative Thinking Strategies. And I know that Barb, our wellness consultant, will be speaking more to this particular program, but the way that it weaves together many of our social emotional learning to assist in that wellness framework, it really, really nicely and just works really well together. So like Lynn said at this point in time or at the beginning, the resources that we are presenting and the resources that we have are not the curriculum. They are lessons that we are able to take away and that we're able to make to help in the development of some of our SEL skills in order to ultimately support our students with building safety, understanding skills, and being ready and available to start to engage in our new curriculum, as well as the opportunity to then reach success in whatever way that looks for each of our students.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Danielle. And again, just appreciate all of the work that you and your team do to support that social emotional learning and that behavioral piece, because you know, we can't move to learning until they're regulated, until students are regulated and can move to that next step of skills. So really appreciate your reminders and you sharing of those big rocks. Awesome. Thank you. And now we're going to be moving on to Lisa Smith. Now, Lisa is also looks at diverse learning, but through the lens of English language learners. All yours, Lisa.
Thank you so much for including us into this conversation. I think it's so important right at the get-go to shed the light on all of our diverse learners and how we can support them in any curriculum that we're engaging in. And so you'll find that I'm probably going to mirror a lot of what Matt and Danielle already said, because we're going to be really student focused. We're looking at the student where we start, and that helps to dictate how we can move them forward through their learning. In keeping English language learners in mind, there isn't necessarily specific content targets that I want to point out that really align with our English language learners. And really need to be focused on, but rather because all of the content we're delivering to our students is delivered through language, every lesson that we're teaching, regardless what grade level, what content area, is also need to be considering that language piece to ensure that our English language learners are able to engage. So the big rocks that I identified are really big rocks as well. That's the who, the what, and the how when we're looking at this new curriculum and any other curriculum that we're approaching. So when I talk about the who, it really helps us in identifying the learning targets. We always start with a student-centered approach. With all of our students, we're looking at the CUE files, we're looking at the progress reports, we're engaging with our colleagues to understand where this child is in their journey in learning to help us to determine the learning targets of where we're going to bring them next. With our ELL learners, there are additional pieces that we need to be considering to help to identify the who, where they are as learners. One piece is the student's journey, which is very similar to student story, which Danielle was talking about. Many of our ELL students are arriving from circumstances from recent immigration. Some might have been settled or be second generation Canadian citizens. So knowing a little bit about that can help guide what we're going to determine in identifying appropriate language targets and content targets for them. If that journey for them arriving at Canada perhaps lend itself to some trauma, unfortunately, or if they weren't even moving directly from home country, maybe there was stops along the way that resulted in gaps in learning. This understanding helps us, again, to determine what the next steps are. When considering content objectives, when we know our student, maybe the readiness isn't there to engage with content. Maybe we need to be looking at relationship first, connecting to the community, understanding routines and expectations. So understanding where that student's arriving from helps us to determine where do we begin with our learning. The home country and culture is also a piece that we need to consider when we're supporting our culturally diverse and linguistically diverse students. This can impact learning in a variety of ways. Understanding what the educational system looked where students are arriving from might help us to understand what needs to be explicitly taught for students to engage in learning here in Canada. Understanding their involvement in the education system, the value, the goals that they had for themselves as learners can help us to determine where they're coming to, again, where they're starting from and where to bring them next. Home language or languages, as many of our students speak multiple languages, can also help guide the process to determine where we start as far as language acquisition. Things like if they're phonetically similar languages or if they have the same alphabet, understanding if a student has literacy skills in home language that we can leverage. These can all help to determine our instructional strategies, how to scaffold, etc. The what for our students with ELL learners is got two areas that we need to considering. We wear two hats all the time. We've got our content hat with our language learners as well as our language objectives hat. When we're talking about our content objectives, we're talking that we're using language to teach concepts. So we need to ensure that language is accessible. These are the outcomes that we're approaching from the program of studies outlined by Alberta Ed. They're grade specific, and these are the ones that we're assessing and reporting on progress reports. We always refer to this as the knowing and doing piece when we're talking about the content. Our language objectives are a little bit different, and we need to be addressing these explicitly through instruction as well. We're using the concepts that we're teaching from the program of studies to support language acquisition. How we track this, how we determine the steps is through the K-12 Calgary Catholic developed ESL benchmarks, those new ones we're working with this year. These are based on second or additional language acquisition goals, so they're a little bit different than our program of studies, and they're grouped into divisional levels in multiple trajectories. And we track and report this through our English language proficiency levels. When we're talking about language objectives, we're talking about how students are able to show what they know, show what they're learning through the reading, listening, speaking, and writing strands. So it's so important when we're addressing any of our instructional methodologies that we really recognize that language and content are inextricably linked. Content is in the inhale and language is the exhale. We're presenting the content through our instruction, and students need to be able to demonstrate what they know through language. And that brings us to the how. So once we know who our students are and identified appropriate learning targets, we need to ask ourselves some really important questions. Do the resources, the instructional strategies, the methodologies we're using to deliver content, does that create a barrier for our students? Are we only considering the dominant culture? Are we making some assumptions about students' experience and background knowledge? Are we allowing all of our students to draw on their assets? So keeping this in mind when we're planning, we need to be sure that we're providing appropriate scaffolding, we're ensuring that students have background knowledge to access content, and that we're using a wide range of those great universal strategies that supports all of our diverse learners to ensure that our students are able to access the content and demonstrate their understanding using the English language that they have, the skills that they have, and bring them along to further language acquisition. We have a great deal of resources posted on our EPD site. Here is just the instructional strategies, and we really try to focus on a lot of the universal strategies because we know that we have really diverse classrooms, so we want really bang for our buck strategies that aren't necessarily targeting just our ELLs, but really help support excellent quality learning for all of our students. So when you explore here, you'll see a wide range, some of those that align with what Matt was talking about for the culturally responsive, but also different strategies to help support language acquisition and scaffolding our content and delivery methods. Our ELL team has 5 consultants as well, so we're a resource available to come out to your schools if you are looking for supports. We know that many schools are receiving new ELL students at all levels across the city in high numbers, so we're always happy to come out and support you in implementing some of these strategies in your classrooms. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for sharing so much important information and also for being responsive to us. I know when I'm talking with a teacher and I know there's something, and just the time you save us to be able to just point us in the right direction is just so very, very appreciated. So thank you to you and all of your team for developing these resources and also for being so responsive to us as well. So thank you. And now we're going to move on to Jody, and Jody's going to talk a little bit about digital literacy. Now, again, technology is something that we identified as a bit of a gap area in the curriculum. And so Jody has been just doing some phenomenal work on connecting with our teams to try to help us build out some supports and resources to support that intentionality around the digital citizen. And so I'm going to pass it on to Jody.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lynn, for having me. So as you can see, some of the big rocks that are related to digital literacy is digital citizenship, digital literacy itself, and technology for learning. So Lynn, if you could move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So by looking at this diagram, you can see that all of these are really interconnected and they all involve each other and they're all related to each other and they don't stand alone for our students. And that is a really important piece when it comes to educational technology because students need that digital citizenship and that digital literacy skills because they are becoming increasingly reliant on technology in their daily lives. And not only is this in their daily lives, but it's in their future careers. So when we think about the rise of the internet and social media, it's really important for students to know and understand how to navigate that in a safe and responsible way. So this allows, by focusing on all of these at one time, it allows our students to make informed decisions about their online behavior, protect their privacy and personal information, and evaluate the credibility and accuracy of the information they find online. So it also helps them use technology in a way that enhances their learning and prepares them for a digital workforce. With all of this, we also have to remember that students need to be taught the ethical, legal, and social issues related to that technology. Next slide, please. So part of what EdTech has done is they have taken the new curriculum and how to look at it and created a digital literacy progression. So at the bottom, when you click on this link, you can pop it open. It's on EdTech's EPD as well, and it has four tabs at the bottom. And so the first tab is technology as learning, and that's our digital citizenship. So when we think of tech as learning, those are the discrete skills that students need, but ones that aren't necessarily in an outcome, and we wouldn't necessarily teach them, but they need to be taught. And things like, this includes things like how to copy and paste, how to record your screen, how to start a new email, how to reply to an email. So all of these things that aren't necessarily curricular outcomes, but they need to know how to do. So that's tech as learning. Tech for learning is the technology we use to support and enhance curricular outcomes. So that's like using Flip to capture student voice, or using Google Earth to learn about mapping and find things on a map and engaging them with math on a map. So that's the technology for learning. So now when we think of technology as learning, this is a double-edged sword because it's not in the curriculum, but it is in the curriculum. So we're taking those pieces that are in the phys ed and wellness and we've pulled them out, but we've boosted them up to include the things that aren't in the curriculum, but that students need to know. We also have technology as learning, which is those basic skills, how to copy and paste, how to open multiple tabs, how to change between tabs, and the grade that it's appropriate for them to know that at is also included on this digital progression. We also have technology as learning, and those are all of our Google tools. So how to use our Google tools and where they fit in and all of those things. And finally, in the last tab, we have actually taken out the outcomes that are specific in the new curriculum and that speak to technology. So whether that's ELA, digital citizenship, and math, it's been pulled out so you can see kind of where it fits and what students need to do. Perfect. Next slide, please. So then, as we're talking about all of this, kind of where we're headed with this and the technology connections to the new curriculum, we have Read and Write and Orbit Note, which again supports all of those students, not just a few, and the tools that they can access on that. So in connection to this, some of our students have the ability to do immersive reader, which is also connected to Microsoft. So again, working with that ELL team and seeing how that fits in for some students. And of course, there's keyboarding is put back into the curriculum starting in grade 1. So we have to look at that and look at the different programs that are available to teach kids how to touch type. And so that's an important, and how we would be remiss if we didn't talk about ChatGPT. So we have some upcoming PG and on that it would be super beneficial for our elementary teachers. You know, your elementary students aren't necessarily yet using ChatGPT, but how can teachers use that to involve some of the frameworks that some of the other consultants have talked about? How can they use that tool to incorporate those tools into their daily lesson plans? So ChatGPT is a powerful tool that's going to be changing education and kind of where we're going with artificial intelligence. So those are all the connections to the new curriculum. Thanks, Lynn.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jody, for sharing that and for continuing to help us build out these connections and resources. So very, very appreciated. And if you haven't, I know we've shared this at our set meetings in person, that that Google Sheet with those 4 tabs. It's just amazing that we have this resource. So please do, you know, print it, provide it to your teachers, especially that last tab, not especially, but that last tab, because it's going to connect directly to where the connections to the curriculum from a technology perspective are, and you don't have to do that digging yourself. So hopefully that'll save teachers some time, because you've pulled out sort of some of those key, again, key outcomes that are connected to the new curriculum, because it's not explicit. It's not nicely organized the way you've done it. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I do know that we have Leanne Gervais next. However, I know she's presenting, and so she was double booked today. So I think what we're going to do is Leanne is going to talk about truth and reconciliation. Oh, you made it. Yay. Is that
Oh
you,
yeah,
Leanne?
I've been
Oh,
here
great.
almost the whole time.
Oh, goodness gracious. I just saw your name pop up here. So thank you. Yay. Okay. I'm going to pass it on to Leanne Gervais, who's new to our team. And so just so very grateful to have Leanne here to share some of the big rocks around Indigenous education. Well,
Hey, hi. Yeah, I'm Leanne Gervais. I just want to introduce myself in case I'm new to someone. I am the Indigenous consultant. And yeah, I just wanted to share some of the big rocks and had a little bit of time to think about this. The first one I'm going to start with is truth and reconciliation, and I have action there. I'll go into that a little bit more. Land-based learning and literature. Truth and reconciliation, I don't know, I don't necessarily see direct outcomes from the new curriculum, but it's something as teachers and in our practice that we're always working on. So, and then if you don't mind just moving to the next slide, Lynn, please. Okay, so truth and reconciliation action. I think, and hopefully we've had a chance to learn the truth about the first peoples of our land. On the quote there, it says, "You have described for you a mountain. We have shown you the path to the top. We call upon you to do the climbing." So that is by Justice Murray St. Clair, and he was the chairperson of Truth and Reconciliation. So the Indigenous team, we're here to walk alongside you. It says, we call upon you to do the climbing. That doesn't mean you need to do it on your own. Of course, we are here to support, walk alongside with you. But what I want to really highlight right now is the 4 steps. So we've learned, we've shared, we are growing, and we've had truth, and now we're really in the stages of action. So what are we doing? How are we actioning this? How are we actioning in our classroom? How are we approaching this in our personal life? How are we informing ourselves of the First Peoples, of the Indigenous people, the Métis and the Inuit? Again, going back to the First Peoples who lived on our land. So this land that we all call home, what do we know about these first people, and how can we use this in the classroom so that everyone has a very strong sense of place and of this land that we live on? So if we want to keep on moving forward, thank you. Okay, so the other one, my other 2 walks were connection to the land and literature. And I will talk about, I didn't put literature necessarily in the title because it will be in this slide. Connection to the land and literature. From what I understand, though, that I'm learning a little bit more about the new curriculum, is that there's mentor texts. And I love that because I love literature. And I'm very aware not everyone has access to elders and or knowledge keepers. Therefore, it's really important for us to find an Indigenous author and learn from them, like they're walking alongside with us in our journey. We have a lot of resources on our EPD, and I'm just going to quickly go through this slide here, and then I'll get to the part where we can learn a little bit more about literature. So connection to the land. That this is very easy. You can do it in the classroom. You can do it just outside your classroom. I know that there's a lot of connections with this in the new curriculum. And what I'm asking you to do, or really just inviting you to do, is to go outside. It's really, I know these things always sound simple, but when they're not a part of our core routines, it's change. So, walk the land. Walk the land can be just really as simple as walking your schoolyard. Maybe there's some plants in your schoolyard. Some schoolyards are lucky enough to have forests, ponds, but maybe you don't. Maybe you have a pine tree, and that's okay too. Those are all gifts from the Creator. So we can learn about the pine. That has been a part of our land from as long as we have known it for. It's not a guest plant here. It's a plant. It's always been here. So what does the pine do? What kind of medicine does it bring? Learn the names of it. And maybe there's on this slide here, there are some, this is the Blackfoot names that you can learn about the plants. So those are our original peoples of this land. So you can learn what name they used. And then there's just a scavenger hunt. So sense, again, another way to get the kids outside, the students outside. There's a video in the left-hand corner exploring new perspectives. Now, the next one is learning their stories, and then it ends with telling the stories. So this is a process that you can follow to help your students get outside, maybe to help you get outside with your students, and learning the stories. Now, again, we don't always have a chance to sit and to learn from elders or knowledge keepers. But again, I want to go back to that text. Please, if you'd like to find an author or you need help finding an author, actually just, yes, you're right, Lynn, finished a PG here about literacy, and where I come in and I can PG with the staff about a number of different books and Indigenous authors that you can use and where you can infuse them into the new curriculum. And this is just a bit of a formula that I shared with the staff here that I was working with, and I would be happy to share it with other staff out, whatever schools are interested, where you'd like me to walk alongside with you. So thank you so much for having me this evening, and please reach out to us through our EPD. We have different ways that you can connect with our teams and our teachers, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Leanne, for sharing that. It's been so awesome. Leanne had the opportunity to come. We had the opportunity to have Leanne come to one of our communities of practice meetings. And it was like, oh my goodness, she was a very popular person because she has so many practicals. She and her team have so many practical, really meaningful ways in which we can engage students in this learning. And so very appreciated. I had originally, oops, of course it's going to
My name is Walter LaValle.
There we go. And we were going to do a Padlet at this point, but we are a little bit behind. So I'm just going to carry on and introduce it to Teresa, who's going to talk a little bit about the early learning connections to these big rocks that we have now heard. What is this looking like within curriculum, within program? And so take it away, Teresa.
Great, thank you, Lynn, and good evening, everyone. So our big rocks in kindergarten, you've heard this a lot, play-based approach to learning. So we continue to work on and develop that concept with the whole continuum of play-based learning, as you can see on the screen. I'm really glad to hear Leanne talk a little bit about mentor texts. That is another one of our big rocks, trying to really integrate quality children's literature. And it was a lovely opportunity the other day to talk to Leanne about how we could represent the Indigenous perspective through literature. And she gave us some great ideas on not only some local authors that we can use, but ways that we can expand and bring that that work alive in our kindergarten classrooms. So we're very excited to continue working on that. And then, of course, we're working on infusing the program statement learning areas into the curriculum. And so, for example, we have the program statement has those 7 areas of learning that support child development. And that is the work, that is what guides our work. And you can see there, Lynn's created the slide to show you where the different pieces of the curriculum fit in. And it's really important that grounds us and roots us in the work that we do in early learning, especially if we are looking down the road at a curriculum change. These concepts will not change, and they will continue to be our foundation. I also want to take a moment just to promote our early learning EPD site. Once again, this is a Google site. It's a very robust site. One of the things that we're starting to add to this site is some additional universal supports, and the universal supports has been a focus of our community of practice. And so on the next slide, you can see that we've started talking a little bit about this, and I just wanted to actually spend a little bit of time on this particular slide. Play-based learning in itself is a wonderful universal strategy. Play-based learning is a way to engage all the learners in your class, and it can be used beyond kindergarten. It doesn't have to just be a kindergarten strategy, but it really does give your students and children a lot of opportunities to access their learning through play. And one of the examples there in the middle is where it says choices, shows a tub of pattern blocks. And there's all kinds of ways that children can start with that with play. They can explore, they can just manipulate the materials. They can use it as part of creative play. They can use it as part of loose parts play. There can be teacher-directed activity with it. And there you can see there's a couple of examples of different teacher-directed activities, but the idea is to provide the choice. So all of those are all entry points for children in a kindergarten program to access the pattern blocks and to start to develop a concept of what the pattern blocks are and how they can work together and start to build up that concept. That multiple entry points as well for ways of scaffolding. Universal strategy might be to have tools available for all children to use, whether they need them or not. So for example, in this particular classroom there on the left, a teacher has a number of number lines that she just keeps in an area that children can access anytime they need it. And sometimes you have children who know their numbers, who recognize their numbers, but they just want to have the number line just to explore and pattern with that. Or then you have other children who are struggling with their numbers, and the pattern line is a way, or the number line is a way to help them continue to build their understanding. And so just by having that there and available and accessible to all students in the class is a great universal strategy, and nobody has to feel that they're being singled out because they can't do something. So it's a very strength-based scaffolding approach to help all students. The other piece of universal strategies that I want to emphasize are visuals. And visuals, you hear this a lot, and people maybe don't understand what we're talking about when we say visuals, but it can be a very, very powerful way for children to engage in day-to-day activities, and as well as to access the learning as well. In this particular example, a teacher has helped students to create the visual schedule themselves, and so you can see that's written in with the children, and they've taken an opportunity to draw pictures to go along with it so that they know what each of the words are, and they can remember what's going on through the day, and they actually refer to that quite a bit, and that's helping with their early learning, with recognizing symbols, with a structure of a day. So, and it's meaning with reading with a purpose. And that visual can be expanded and done in many, many different ways. So these are kinds of the concepts that we're going to work on with Community of Practice. I'm really excited. We have just such a great group to work with. And so we're going to continue to develop out these particular kinds of activities, as well as to focus on some really solid mentor texts and activities that we can do with that. Very, very excited to share with you that one of the authors of our book that we've purchased for all of the kindergarten teachers this year, the Outdoor and Nature Play in Early Childhood Education. One of the authors is Dr. Dietz, and she is going to be presenting for all of our kindergarten teachers on the PG Day on January 30th. We're really looking forward to her talking more about the play-based learning, as well as setting up provocations to inspire that wonder and curiosity. And I think that will really help to support the universal strategies that we're building out as well. And we have another exciting opportunity with the guest teachers. Lynn has found some additional funds to support some guest teacher time so we can build out some PLCs for kindergarten teachers. And so on the PG Day, we will have the form for teachers to fill out if they're interested in this. We will, each teacher that is part of the PLC will receive 3 half-day guest teachers to work with small groups of other teachers and the consultants to really dig into this work of play and universal supports. So we're very, very excited and very grateful to be part of this new curriculum and Lynn's work here too. So thank you all.
Fabulous. We are so excited about this. Teresa and I really have had lots of great conversations around this. And, it's interesting because play more and more is becoming more and more important in all grades, especially now when we talk about wellness and looking at safety and those entry points for students to enter into the learning. And that starts with us, you know, being able to inspire wonder and curiosity. So I'm very, very excited as well to see the great work happening, not just in kindergarten, but as we move forward with implementing those big rocks. I know we are, so thank you so much, Teresa. I know it is getting late. We have about 10 minutes. I'm going to flip through, so I'm sorry, NCIS team. I am going to flip through to one of the slides that we'll come over this again in our in-person meetings, but I think the really important thing we want to talk about today is when we are looking at our physical education and wellness curriculum. And we are so grateful to have Kevin Warner and the team. Wow, there was lots of slides in here. Sarah Simone and Kevin Warner and Lily, our new consultant, who are going to share a little bit around the Fully Alive. Now, this is going to pertain to all. We now have the all the way through the elementary that is being implemented so far this year. So just wanting them to connect a little bit about Fully Alive and why it's so important within our wellness curriculum. So off to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure Kevin is on the road. He was going to preface the presentation with a word or two, but I'm not sure if he's here yet. So what I'll do is I'll just chat and he can interrupt me if he shows up here. So this slide here, you'll see Fully Alive. There's 3 main rocks here. And just to be very, the main point would be the who is the children, just ordinary Canadian kids from a variety of cultures, and just helping them kind of go through some daily life experiences through the lens of the Catholic faith. So there's 5 themes. You're going to have this overriding theme of being created and loved by God. And how does that affect our relationships? How does that affect our dignity and our sexuality? How does that affect our commitments and being faithful and trustworthy? And it finishes theme 5 with how do then we relate to the world? What is our kind of global sense and our responsibility, both environmentally and as well to society? So I'll get you to flip to the next one there. The next slide there, Lynn, if you could. So the next one is kind of the what, essentially the why. That was supposed to be Jesus kind of going, why, right? So this is our main why. So the main why here is because we're trying to permeate. Of course, we know that that's the goal of Catholic education, is to have this opportunity. So here's a resource that does it for us. So for the second half of the year, we're going to use these lessons that are, you can see the how here is the 3 steps to every lesson, the we experience. So it's going to be a story based. And that is why we've got this cross-curricular piece here where I spoke with a teacher the other day and she said, I've got only so many wellness classes. And I said, absolutely. Why don't you sit down? So here's a sample long range there. So you can see Fully Alive in yellow is highlighted starting January. So I said, why don't you look at your dates and see how many classes you actually have and which lessons you'll teach on those dates and see how many you have left over by the time May is done. Now, the reason that we want to leave June free is that we've got a lot of kind of catching up, dotting of those outcomes that we missed. We want to leave June wellness classes open to kind of dot a few I's. So we've got Fully Alive from January to May. In June, you're going to have Fully Alive theme 3 happening in religion class. So I had a religion teacher say, I don't know if I'll have time. And I said, Fully Alive is going to happen the last 2 weeks of religion after the Growing in Faith, Growing in Christ is done. So you're going to find on EPD, we've got this alignment doc. And that's going to outline for you exactly which lesson aligns with which phys ed wellness outcome. And then Lynn obviously prepared something to help students or help teachers assess the evidence of learning based on that chart of alignment of outcomes to Fully Alive topics. So sorry it's so brief, and please reach out if you have any other information or questions regarding Fully Alive. Happy to support.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I'm sorry, my computer is glitching. It's not recognizing when I advance. So I'm so sorry for that. I think again, it's still being very challenging. I'm going to see if it's Gonna work for me now. I think that was the middle slide I couldn't get to.
Oh,
So
that's okay. Yeah,
I'm sorry
Very-
about that.
that's okay. That's all
Um,
right. Those are just the charts you'll see on the alignment docs, which are all found on EPD.
Yeah, and I just want to speak to this slide. I think it's so important, the work that you've been doing with your team, with Lily and Kevin and Charity. I think that, you know, what we found with physical education and wellness is we've got the physical literacy pieces in that movement. We've got the wellness, but now we also have you know, we also got, you know, healthy eating, and we've got, you know, financial literacy, and they're all dimensions of wellness, which is beautiful. We love that the wellness components are integrated, but we're kind of catching up. We're catching up with now, you know, if we center on the curriculum, now we see these resources that are available to bring in to the work. And again, Fully Alive is one of those programs that allows us to permeate that faith. And what you're seeing here in the alignment document that that has been provided by Sarah and the team is what is covered in the resources of physical literacy, the wellness, but then kind of where do we want to supplement in that middle piece. So really, really appreciate the work you've done. It's incredible. So thank you so much. It's just over and above what we ever could have expected as far as support documents. And so very, very appreciate everything you've done with your team. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lynn.
And Kevin is here, so I'm going to try to go back in the slides. It's again, I'm not
Lynn,
quite sure.
while you're trying that, I'll just say good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. There was a question there about parent letters that came up, and yes, those are now available on EPD. So if they're grade-specific letters, because obviously those letters address the outcomes for that particular grade. So please navigate to Religious Education and Family Life on EPD, and then under the Fully Alive section for each grade or the particular grade that you teach, you'd be able to find those parent letters that are ready to go. It would be not appropriate to not acknowledge Fully Alive, a wonderful resource. It's been in our schools for the last couple of years. Last Tuesday, the 10th of January, CBC Toronto wrote an article, posted a story about Fully Alive, Vivre le Paiement for our French immersion schools, describing it as both homophobic and transphobic because it describes the Catholic definition of marriage between a man and a woman. It also describes Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, where the creation story, Genesis creation story, male and female, he created them. In response, Pearson Publishing, which is now owned by a different stakeholder over in England, they're reshuffling some of their resources. And so Fully Alive isn't going to be supported digitally on Pearson effective March 1st. However, it is going to be supported through a different website. So we're going to be sharing information on that. Again, I'd like to emphasize that the resource does teach a Catholic understanding of marriage, quite different than obviously our societal understanding of marriage. But at all times, we are teaching the both pastoral in nature, as well as adhering to the Catholic understanding of the human person, understanding that people need to be treated always with love, respect, compassion, sensitivity, and never judgment. If you have additional questions or wish to, chat further, please reach out to me at any time. This resource is approved for use in Alberta, Ontario, and Saskatchewan Catholic schools. It has the endorsements of the Conference of Catholic School Superintendents of Alberta, the Alberta Catholic School Trustees Association, and the Alberta Conference of Catholic Bishops. And so again, those are very substantial endorsements for this. And again, we're going to have that updated login information as it becomes available. Just a very gentle reminder, Sarah, of course, shared wonderful information. Themes 1, 2, 4, and 5 are taught in wellness, santé. Theme 3 has to be taught during religious education class because, again, those are covering the provincially mandated, the new Pew outcomes related to human sexuality. My email address is on the next slide. If you have any follow-up questions or wish to dialogue further, we again highly value what we call the racial diversity that's abundantly present in this beautiful resource. And you've already heard from Sarah. So Lynn, thank you so much for making time for us. We really appreciate it. And again, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kevin. And again, we really appreciate you like helping us navigate and to really the work you and your team are doing to support the new curriculum. And again, it's I also appreciate your transparency and your communication around this and being here tonight to update everybody. So thank you so much. At this time, team, new curriculum implementation team, I'm just going to invite, is there anything pressing that we need to address that we can't address in our in-person session? I just want to honor the work that you've done in preparation for this, but I also want to recognize it is 5:30. And so we know that everybody's tired. It's been a long day. So consultants, new curriculum consultants, is there anything pressing that you'd like to share before we close our meeting?
Lynn, math is good.
Awesome. And I know we've got the sign up for mathology.ca coming up. It was sent out to your set reps, the admin set reps. So if you're a mathology.ca school, then there's PG coming up for that next week. So please do reach out to Bev Dutton or the new curriculum at cssd.ab.ca if you don't have that info, and she can share more about that with you. We have some exciting things planned for you. Again, we want to make it really hands-on as we're moving forward with this work. And please know that, yeah, as you can see all the great stuff that's coming up, a story stroll, like what's that? That's just your hook for next time for our in-person meetings. And then just want to remind you as I'm flipping through here that we just recognize the work of our district. We are so blessed to be able to have the level of engagement and commitment and the prioritization around those big rocks. And we want to keep that at the center of our work. And so again, I so appreciate them walking alongside us, but them also coming out tonight to share with you, because this sets the foundation now for where we're moving forward with building out resources and supports in our PG for looking at curriculum through the lens of inclusion and differentiation. And so at this point, I'm going to invite Matt McDonald, our one of our Pew consultants, to please close us in prayer.
Thanks, Lynn. Before we do the prayer, just keep ourselves in the presence of our Lord. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Almighty God, through your Holy Spirit, you create unity in the midst of diversity. We acknowledge that human diversity is an expression of your manifold love for our creation. We confess that in our brokenness as human beings, we turn diversity into a source of alienation, injustice, oppression, and wounding. Empower us to recognize and celebrate differences as your great gift to the human family. Enable us to be the architect of understanding, of respect, and love. Through the Lord, the ground of all unity, we pray. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, St. Paul, pray for us.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks for understanding to the new curriculum consultants. Again, we're excited to share information, but we'll have time to do that whenever we are in our in-person. So if you have any questions, again, we are really looking for your feedback. So we do have a final mentee here. So please do take a second before you sign off here tonight and share some feedback with us. If you have questions, comments about tonight, where you would like us to move forward, again, we're gauging this based on what our lens is. So if there are ideas and thoughts that you have, please do reach out to us, because we're continue to try to be responsive to what you are seeing in your schools as the needs, but also as the ways we can build on those great successes, of which we are seeing many, many great things happening. So thank you to everyone. Have a wonderful night, and please do complete that feedback mentee so we have a bit of data to move forward with. So thanks so much. Bye, everyone. Have a great night.